Hi everyone, welcome. You can see I've got a number of things laid out here on the bench. That includes the tripod for the camera, but I figured I'd grab the camera really quick and take a step back to show what I've got going on over here. I've also got some notes on this, so I thought I'd share these as well. As you can tell, there's food and grit and squirt bottle with some moisture in it. Pretty routine. It's a 61-day African nightcrawler bin. And 61 days ago, when we populated the main bin itself, the material that we removed those worms from was set aside. And out of that became what I call a cocoon nursery. So all those finished castings were left in this tub right here. And the idea of that was that the cocoons that were left behind, even though the worms were removed, the assumption was that there's still a bunch of cocoons and the potential for a lot of babies to emerge from those cocoons. So we've been running this for almost 2 months now, or approximately 2 months, and the one thing a lot of people have been saying about my cocoon nurseries is that, add a lot of moisture. If you add a lot of moisture, you'll almost guarantee speedy hatching. So that's the game plan for the cocoon nursery with the spray bottle. Here in the worm bin, the feeding style, as you might have noticed here, was lasagna style. Over the past 5 feedings, we've been layering in the food to sort of create almost like a layer cake style feeding in each time. And today I'm going to do the same. It's been 9 days since we last fed this system, and I got a feeling it's ready for a little bit of food. We got some pumpkin here, we got some coffee, even some used tea bags, as well as some used coffee filters. So I'm going to put on a glove and let's get to work. So our cocoon nursery remains resting here on top of the main bin. We'll leave it here and check in on it and just remove it and get it out of the way once we're finished. So now the squirting down and dampening of the material in these bins has kind of become my commonplace check-in practice. And hopefully we're going to find nice and damp material. And you can even tell just from the look of it, it's got this nice dark color to it. It's definitely got some good moisture content. But I always tend to underestimate the need for moisture, so I don't want to allow my senses to muddy the fact that I am going to add water. I'm going to do it now. And I'm going to try to unload the entire bottle into this material. Keep it nice and damp because, people have been pretty consistent in saying the more damp, the more chance the stuff will finally hatch quickly. And after 61 days, these things are probably ready to go, so I'm going to get to work on this now. Let's speed up the camera so you don't have to endure me emptying an entire water bottle into a worm bin. Well, I think those burping sounds are the cue to tell us that we're done. It's no longer reaching liquid when it tries to pick up the next squirt worth of fluid. So that felt like it was very appropriate. The material was way drier than it first appeared to me. So once again, chalk that up to me being tricked by the castings. The castings are really nice, but they were probably way too dry for cocoon hatching. And yeah, I think that this dampening will help a great deal. The only other thing we do after this usually is try to prevent the evaporation of the material, or the moisture from the material. I don't remember how it was put on here, but I think it may have been something like this. Try to maximize our coverage all over the entire batch, and I guess let it continue. The only part of this that I am skeptical of still is maybe the temperature at which I'm storing these cocoons, especially these African night crawlers. They're a tropical worm, probably reliant on pretty warm temperatures for nature to play its course. So I've been wondering if storing these on the floor right beneath my drafty window down here in my unheated basement in December is the best place. It might not be optimal, so I might have to start scouting out a warmer place to store my cocoon nurseries if I really want to start seeing some action. And stay on the moisture topic for sure. So let's get these out of the way and move on to feeding the adult worms. I believe we can drop the camera down a bit too now. Give us a little bit better view of what's going on over here. Since I'll do my best to preserve all the stuff that was used to build this up until now, so, such as these old pieces of paper and then all the layers that make up the original lasagna arrangement. You know, I'll do my best to try to preserve things for quite some time, but I believe even during the last check-in, these pieces of paper that are sort of meant to be top coverings are just in multiple little bits and pieces anymore. We questioned whether we would want to keep them anymore or just possibly reuse them as bedding. Well, some of them seem to be giving up, or maybe I tried too aggressively to pick this piece up, but it just seems to be shredding under its own weight. But some of these are actually holding up pretty good. All the ones that I kind of stacked up over here on the edge seem like they've held up well enough to be reused. So, I don't know. Call me crazy. I think we'll set them aside and we'll see if we can possibly get one final top covering out of these at the end. I think we should be able to. But maybe that stuff too is going to be best repurposed for bedding at some point in the near future. And we could put some new stuff there in its place. Just some of this stuff's a little dry over here in the corner. Just wondering if the plastic covering was thorough enough. I guess not entirely. Some of these other edges are a bit dry too. It's not the end of the world. It's just that material, you know, once it gets to that dry state, there's not a whole lot that the worms can do with it. So they'll be seeking out damp stuff to spend their time on. And that stuff just sort of gets left behind. So I just really want to do my best to try to keep the contents of my bins nice and damp. But without lids, I do rely pretty heavily on the coverings. Alright, so this is kind of top layer number one. You can definitely see like a cavitation over here. Whatever it is that was in here has vanished. Consumed by the worms, leaving just a void. This was a coffee filter. I guess also serving the purpose of a layer in this stack. This stuff here to me looks like apple bits. I didn't take the time to review the last video of our previous check-in on this bin. The last feeding was probably apples, judging from the couple leftovers I could see here and there. Some of it even seems like it's got a pretty good amount of the apple, the meaty part of the apple, remaining as leftovers. Whoa, look at all these worms hanging out in between the layers of cardboard. Got this delicious apple sitting here and they're just hanging out inside the cardboard. This to me looks like a little bit of mold developing. So, a couple scraps of leftover apple. Doesn't seem to me like a reason enough yet to abandon our intended feeding for the day, so I'm pressing on. This piece of cardboard is pretty popular. It seems like both sides of it are covered in worms. Maybe it's not the cardboard, maybe it's just the material that was touching it or was resting in between it and the next layer. I don't know. All of this dark stuff I'm assuming is coffee, bits of coffee remaining. Coffee seems like maybe a little bit of an uninteresting thing if you got all kinds of other yummy options. But then again, I don't know, I'm not a worm, how would I know? Alright, so I kind of went deep dive on this one to see what else is left in terms of leftover layers. once in a while, I think I sort of pull together whatever little scraps of cardboard I can find to construct sort of a makeshift replacement layer for whatever was there before. Because you can see this stuff is getting pretty beaten up. It's getting beaten up and eaten up. Here too, this might be coffee. This might be paper towel. Here too, these are just sort of random materials used to build the various layers of this thing in the past. Something like this looks like it might have just been part of the bedding that the bin was originally built out of. So I mean, this bin was built with food included, so it wasn't just a box full of bedding. I did pepper in some yummy morsels of food, which sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but in this case I did. This was one of my bins that I sort of staged with not only a bunch of cozy bedding to hang out in, but some food as well. And then perhaps a week into its life, the bin was fed in a kind of conventional fashion, which probably in my case means it was fed down the middle. But other than that initial feeding that came prior to the introduction of the worms, as well as that first feeding, that what I refer to as conventional feeding down the middle, every other feeding in here since then has been this lasagna style. Originally I started out with pretty small pieces of cardboard and stacked them up, and then eventually I tried to open up the hole to make it larger. Then I took those cardboard layers and started putting them side by side. So I think we'd already in the past decided that we wanted to go with kind of a larger footprint on our lasagna bin. So I'm going to try to keep true to that by opening up a pretty good sized hole into which we can begin the reconstruction of our lasagna layers. Definitely utilizing some of the old stuff that I pulled out. And I've got some new stuff which I showed earlier. So we've got ourselves a nice big hole here. To me it seems like the beginning layer should be bedding, so I think this might be a good opportunity for us to put some of this previously top covering newspaper shreds, and here's some paper towel too. A variety of different pieces of paper that has already, been in the bin here for some time now. So it's pretty advanced as far as its breakdown goes. But then we can start putting in layers of food. Maybe a little bit of the coffee, since we've got an entire filter full to do away with. So we've emptied about half of it into here already. And I'm always skeptical about the coffee. I don't know why. To me it seems like it has a better chance of being eaten as long as there's something else mixed into it. So I think I'll take some of these little shreds of pumpkin that was left behind. I took the pumpkin and I placed it into this tray. I ran it up to my microwave oven to thaw it. I didn't want to take frozen stuff and place it into the worm bin. It just seemed a little bit cruel. So I thought I would really quickly try to thaw it out, and it only took a few minutes on high for all these frozen chunks of pumpkin to give up being frozen, become nice and pliable. The really cool thing is that I can pull out a good bit of the moisture now just by squeezing these things. You can probably see it pouring out of the material as I squeeze. So I think even if coffee is a little bit of a boring thing down here, I've got a feeling that the pumpkin being there is going to help increase the appeal of it. So now here's a nice new coffee filter. There was a used one here earlier somewhere. And while a nice used coffee filter, I just tore it in half. Only a piece of it came out when I tried to tug on it. While a nice broken in piece of paper like that is something that the worms are most likely going to be drawn to first, let's just be really generous with the bedding because I've got a good amount of it here to do away with. So that's actually going to turn into another layer of our lasagna. How does that look? I like that. Pretty cool. So let's see. At this point, it makes me wonder, do I have enough stuff to support all these layers? Well, we can always throw in a little bit more pumpkin. Oh, I've been trying to save the fluid because all those tea bags that I was going to use as sort of a lasagna layer of their own, they're all totally dry. I thought that soaking up a bunch of pumpkin juice into them before putting them in here would be a smart thing to do. So that's my plan. So let's see how much moisture we can salvage from these chunks of pumpkin to serve that purpose. And besides that, I can reduce the size of each pumpkin chunk considerably this way. Keep things nice and flat. Make it a little bit easier to fit everything in here the way we've planned it. So here's sort of part of a layer of cardboard, I think. Here's another one. It's almost complete. We did make a pretty good size hole, so there seems to be room enough for it. What is this? Oh, this was some sort of something that I broke open. I think this was some sort of a nut or a pit or a seed or something that I noticed it once previously, and I did a double take, and I wondered to myself, hey, what the heck is that? Because I didn't recognize it. Oh, all these worms. So I didn't know what that was, and I kind of questioned it, but I didn't go beyond that. And I've seen it once or twice, but at this point, out of curiosity, I sort of jammed my thumb through it. So I doubt that we'll be picking up on that in the future. I got a feeling it might be a lot more likely to get broken down now that it's in this form. So let's see. Oh, even more layer material. So this was just what, stacked up. Is there any more layers here that I need to recycle? Oh, maybe not. Maybe we can actually start stacking in some more of our food. So we'll put in a little bit more boring coffee. But maybe we'll start combining it with tea. How does that sound? Let's see how much of this pumpkin juice we can soak up over here. Get these tea bags nice and damp again. And they kind of make their own layer because they've got the food, which is all the leaves, but they're also nested within their own little compartment of bedding / carbon food source. So that's a pretty cool little layer there, and we've used up a good amount of our fluid here. So luckily we've got a few more pieces to use to extract a little bit more fluid from. Let's see how much we get. Quite a bit, you can see. Alright, so I'm going to get those other tea bags in here, let them start soaking, so we could use them in a future layer. But before we can do that, I think we need to keep building up, right? So I wish I had more material to jam in between each of these layers, but I guess it's mainly pumpkin and tea leaves. Most of the pumpkin is gone now, with the exception of just a couple little short scraps here. Maybe we'll break one of them in half. Try to save some for yet another layer up on top, because I've still got a whole bunch of tea, but I got a feeling now that we're gonna really need to step up this layer. So I think the tea is gonna go in a little bit more densely than it did into the previous layer. So I'm gonna try to do away with all of it at this point into this here layer. Okay, it's got such a nice scent to it. I think it's either rose hips or maybe that red zinger from Celestial Seasonings. They both have the rose hips in them. It smells so good. So now I thought we had a nice intact slice of cardboard, which was our initial top covering cardboard. even when we first opened things up, it seemed like it was in very good shape still, but maybe we already used it. This might be a piece of salvaged lasagna layer. This might also be that. But maybe we used it already. It seems that way, doesn't it? That's okay. It's in a better place down deep where it's going to get a whole bunch of attention and get gobbled up by the worms rather than being neglected. So I guess the new top covering is going to be the last little piece of material that I've got, which is this last coffee filter. It'll become the last lasagna layer, but before we do that, I've also got a little bit of extra soiled napkin, extra carbon boost. So maybe these things kind of working in conjunction with each other can become our sort of top covering lasagna layer, which will be here to welcome us when we come back the next time. So I know that we saw good numbers of worms when we were plowing through the system. I'm tempted to try probing down elsewhere and take a peek, but I just feel like I would disrupt our carefully built and oh so nice lasagna layer. So at this point, I think our best bet is to simply start covering this thing up, see what we can make of these pretty tattered chunks of paper that we removed from the top covering in the beginning. Every time I handle them, they feel like they're self-destructing just under their own weight. Here and there, we've been able to sort of unfold some of them. This one looked like it might be a good candidate for that, but you can see it's tearing. It's just so fragile. So let's just use it as is to the best of our ability and take what we can get. This is definitely going to be a ragtag top covering today. If I can cover at least the lasagna layer, I'll be satisfied. And I believe we've got enough to do that here. This, I believe, is actually sort of a double layer. There's some newspaper stuck to the bottom, but there's a coffee filter here. So it too, pretty beaten up. A few scraps of coffee still clinging to it here and there. So we're almost out of material here, but I believe we do have enough to pull off getting this system covered up one final time with these sheets of newspaper. And I believe the next time we come in here, these pieces of newspaper are going to get reused in a more noble fashion by being bedding for the feeding. Maybe even become a lasagna layer of their own. How would that be? That would be nice, wouldn't it? Alright everyone, that's it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed my check-in with these African night crawlers. 61 days now in this new environment. And 61 days of waiting for those cocoons to hatch. I'm ready to see some action over there. So hopefully by dampening things, we're helping to speed the process. But only time will tell, right? Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.